The call came at midnight, same number that hadn't contacted me in 15 years. Maverick, it's Christopher. I need your help. My son-in-law's voice was shaking. The same man who convinced my daughter I was just a cook unworthy of their family was now begging me for $850,000. The same person who banned me from my granddaughter's birthday parties was suddenly very interested in my resources. But here's what Christopher didn't know. While he was busy being ashamed of me, I was quietly building something that would make him eat every word. I listened to his panicked explanation about federal charges, frozen assets, and impending jail time. Then I said just 5 words. I'll think about it, Christopher. The silence that followed was worth 15 years of humiliation. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. But let me start from the beginning and tell you how a worthless chef became the only person who could save the man who destroyed his family. It started in August 2008 at Madison's wedding. I'd saved for 2 years to pay for her dress, a beautiful $4,200 Vera Wang gown she'd fallen in love with. I was so proud walking her down the aisle of the Chicago Botanical Garden. But when the photographer gathered the family for portraits, Christopher's mother, Eleanor Hamilton, placed her hand on my shoulder. Maverick, dear, perhaps you could help in the kitchen. I'm sure the catering staff could use an extra hand. She wasn't asking. Madison looked at me, then at Christopher, then back at me. Dad, maybe that's best, just for the photos. I spent my daughter's wedding reception washing dishes in the kitchen of the venue I'd helped pay for. Every single family photo shows the Hamiltons. Old Chicago money, 5 generations of bankers and lawyers. Not one shows the bride's father. That was the first sign. The second came 6 months later. Madison was pregnant with my granddaughter, and I drove to their Lincoln Park townhouse with a handmade crib. Took me 3 weeks of evenings in my garage workshop. Solid oak, carved details, the whole 9 yards. Christopher answered the door in his $3,000 Armani suit, fresh from his office at Hamilton and Associates. He looked at the crib, then at me in my work clothes. Maverick, we appreciate the thought, but we've already ordered furniture from Restoration Hardware. Everything needs to match the nursery design. He didn't invite me in. Maybe you could return this to wherever you bought it. I didn't buy it, Christopher. I made it. Oh, his smile was pure condescension. Well, Madison and I have discussed this. We think it's best if Emma grows up understanding the difference between appropriate influences and... He gestured at my calloused hands. Other influences. What's that supposed to mean? Look, I respect what you do. Cooking is honest work. But Emma's going to attend Latin school, and then Northwestern, then probably law school. She needs to see what success actually looks like. I stood there holding my granddaughter's crib, while this man, who'd never worked a day of physical labor in his life, explained why my love wasn't good enough for his family. Madison appeared behind him, 8 months pregnant. Dad, Christopher's right. We need to think about Emma's future. That handmade crib sits in my garage to this day. Emma's never seen it. The pattern continued for 15 years. Christmas cards returned unopened. Birthday invitations that never came. School plays where I learned about my granddaughter's achievements through neighborhood gossip. Christopher made sure I understood my place. At Madison's birthday dinner in 2015, he accidentally seated me at the children's table. When I opened my restaurant expansion to 3 locations in 2018, he told people I was playing restaurant like it was a hobby. The worst was Emma's 10th birthday party at their new house on Michigan Avenue. $2 million penthouse, panoramic lake views, guest list full of Christopher's corporate friends and their children. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway with a birthday present, a cookbook I'd written just for her, full of family recipes and stories about her grandmother. Christopher met me at the door. Maverick, this is awkward. We weren't expecting you. It's my granddaughter's birthday. And we love that you remembered, but this isn't really your crowd. He gestured inside where men in $1,000 suits discussed stock portfolios while their wives planned charity galas. Madison appeared, looking uncomfortable. Dad, maybe we could do something separate? Just us? That separate something never happened. I drove home that day understanding the rules. Christopher had won. He'd convinced my daughter that her father's love came with too much embarrassment attached. But Christopher made one crucial mistake. He assumed that because I didn't fight back, I had given up. I hadn't given up. I'd gotten busy. The cost of staying silent wasn't just missing birthday parties. It was watching my granddaughter grow up thinking I didn't care. Every holiday card I sent to Emma came back unopened. Not returned to sender, opened, then resealed and sent back. Someone was reading my letters to my granddaughter and deciding they weren't appropriate. I found this out in 2019 when my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, mentioned seeing Madison at the post office. She was very upset, kept saying something about protecting Emma from confusion. I didn't understand what she meant. My own daughter was screening my letters to my granddaughter. The financial cost was real too. When Madison cut contact, I'd planned to help with Emma's education fund, had already set aside $50,000 in a college account. Instead, I redirected that money into expanding my restaurant business. If I couldn't be part of Emma's life, at least I could build something that might matter to her someday. The social isolation was harder to measure, but just as painful. Chicago's restaurant community is tight-knit. Word travels fast about personal drama. I started declining industry events because I was tired of explaining why my daughter wasn't speaking to me. In 2020, the James Beard Foundation invited me to judge their Midwest regional competition. Huge honor, career-defining moment. But Madison's friend worked for the foundation. I knew she'd be there. I knew Christopher would be there as her plus one. I almost said no. Then I realized what I was doing. I was shrinking my own life to accommodate their shame. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. If Madison wanted to choose Christopher's world over her father, fine. But I wasn't going to disappear. I was going to build something so undeniable that their judgment wouldn't matter. I started making calls, not to Madison, to business contacts, suppliers, investors, people who understood that success in the food industry isn't about pedigree, it's about execution. February 2020, I incorporated Spencer Holdings as my investment company, bought my first food distribution warehouse that spring. While Christopher was managing other people's money, I started buying the businesses that supplied Chicago's restaurant scene. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my son-in-law collected fees for moving money around, I was building the infrastructure that actually fed the city. By 2021, Spencer Holdings owned 3 distribution centers, held contracts with 47 restaurants, and employed 112 people. Revenue hit $8.7 million. But I kept operating my original restaurant, Spencer's Kitchen on Lincoln Avenue. Same red brick facade, same 48 seats, same menu I'd been perfecting for 20 years. Because Christopher needed to see me as just a chef for my plan to work. Every slight, every condescending comment, every family gathering I was excluded from, I was keeping score. Not for revenge, for motivation. Christopher thought he was protecting his family from my influence. He had no idea what my influence was about to become. The midnight phone call on March 15th, 2023 started polite enough. "Maverick, I know this is unexpected." Christopher's voice had that familiar tone, the one he used when he needed something but didn't want to admit it. "Christopher, it's been a while." "Yes, well, circumstances change." A long pause. "I'm calling because I have a situation that requires discretion and liquid assets." Liquid assets. Not help, not a favor. Liquid assets. "What kind of situation?" "Legal complications. Temporary, of course. My attorney says everything will be resolved quickly. But there are some cash flow issues while my accounts are under review." Under review. That's how rich people say frozen by federal investigators. "How much do you need?" $850,000. Just short term. I can pay you back with 20% interest within 6 months. I let the silence stretch. 20% interest on a loan that size would net me $170,000. Christopher was offering me more money than I used to make in 3 years. "That's a lot of money, Christopher. I realize it's substantial. But I know you've done well with your restaurant." "My restaurant. Singular. like I was still operating one small kitchen on Lincoln Avenue. What makes you think I have that kind of money? Come on, Maverick. Everyone knows successful restaurants generate significant cash flow. His voice carried that familiar hint of condescension. I'm sure you've been prudent with your earnings. Prudent? You've always been good with money, careful, conservative. Each word dripped with barely concealed disdain. I'm simply asking you to consider an investment opportunity. An investment opportunity. He was packaging his desperation as a business proposition. What's the money for? Legal fees, bail, some regulatory nonsense about compliance violations? His voice tightened. Nothing serious, just bureaucratic harassment from people who don't understand sophisticated financial strategies. Sophisticated financial strategies. That's what rich people call fraud when they get caught. When do you need an answer? Soon, very soon. The desperation was starting to leak through his practiced calm. Monday morning, actually. The situation requires immediate attention. 4 days. 4 days to decide whether to save the man who'd spent 15 years treating me like an embarrassment. I'll need to review my finances. Of course, I understand. Relief flooded his voice. But Maverick, I should mention, this matter requires complete discretion. Madison doesn't need to know the details. No point worrying her with complicated financial issues. Madison doesn't need to know. He wanted to take my money while keeping my daughter in the dark about his problems. You haven't told Madison about your situation? She knows I'm dealing with some regulatory questions, nothing more. I prefer to handle these things myself. Handle these things himself. By borrowing money from the father-in-law he'd been humiliating for over a decade. Christopher, can I ask you something? Certainly. Why me? You must have other options. Your family, your business partners. A longer pause this time. Well, the situation is somewhat public. My usual sources are cautious about association during active investigations. Active investigations. His rich friends were running for the hills. But you think it's safe for me to get involved? Your family, Maverick. Different rules apply. Family. Now I was family. When he needed $850,000, suddenly I qualified as family. I need to ask Madison what she thinks. No. The word came out sharp, fast, then softer. That is, I'd prefer to keep this between us until everything's resolved. Madison has enough stress with Emma's school situation. What school situation? Private school applications. Very competitive. The last thing she needs is worry about temporary financial complications. He was lying. Madison's stress wasn't about school applications. It was about discovering her husband was under federal investigation. Christopher, are you in legal trouble? Nothing I can't handle. Just need to bridge some short-term liquidity issues while my attorneys sort out regulatory misunderstandings. Regulatory misunderstandings. The euphemisms kept getting more elaborate. I'll think about it. Maverick, I need you to understand something. His voice changed again, harder now. This isn't just about me. This affects Madison, Emma, our family's reputation. Our family's reputation. The family I'd been excluded from for 15 years. Are you threatening me, Christopher? Of course not. I'm simply explaining the stakes. If this situation isn't resolved quickly and quietly, there could be complications for everyone involved. There it was, the real Christopher Hamilton. When charm and condescension failed, he resorted to veiled threats. I'll call you back tomorrow, Christopher. Maverick, please don't misunderstand. I'm grateful for your consideration. I know we've had our differences, but family is family. Family is family. Coming from the man who'd spent 15 years proving I wasn't worthy of his family. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about everything Christopher didn't know. He had no idea what kind of fire he was playing with. The next morning, I had 3 meetings that would have surprised Christopher, but then Christopher never paid attention to what I actually did during those 15 years of silence. First meeting was at 8:30 a.m. with my corporate attorney, Janet Walsh, at her office in the Willis Tower. Same building where Christopher worked, actually, just 20 floors higher. Maverick, before we discuss your son-in-law's situation, We need to review the federal cooperation agreement, Janet said, sliding a folder across her mahogany desk. Federal cooperation agreement. Not something just a chef typically needs to worry about. The FBI finished their interview process last month. Agent Wells confirmed your information was instrumental in building their case. Janet's expression was grave. You understand what this means if Christopher contacts you directly? He already has. Janet's eyebrows shot up. When? Last night. Asking for $850,000 in bail money. Jesus Christ, Maverick. He called you for bail money? Janet started taking notes. What did you tell him? That I'd think about it. Good. Don't commit to anything until we discuss this with the Bureau. This could be exactly what they need to close their case. The federal agents had been very interested in Spencer Holdings' business dealings, particularly our contracts with restaurants that Christopher's clients had recommended for investment opportunities. Turns out several of those restaurants were vehicles for money laundering. Christopher had been skimming funds from client accounts, moving them through fake restaurant investments, then recovering them as consulting fees. He'd been using the food industry, my industry, to hide his crimes. Second meeting was at 10 a.m. with Daniel Brennan, the James Beard Award winner, who'd become something of a mentor as Spencer Holdings expanded. Mav, you sure you want to do this? Daniel asked over coffee at his flagship restaurant, Meridian. I know what this guy put you through. Daniel was one of the few people who knew the full scope of Spencer Holdings. He'd been quietly advising me on acquisitions for 3 years. He doesn't know what he's asking for, I said. That's what worries me. You're about to reveal assets worth $11.3 million to someone who's been treating you like hired help. $11.3 million. That was the number from last month's valuation after I sold the restaurant chain to Midwest Food Group. The deal had been in the works for 2 years, with confidentiality agreements ensuring public announcement wouldn't happen until April. Christopher had no idea I'd just completed the largest privately held restaurant sale in Chicago history. Daniel, he thinks I'm just a chef with maybe a few $100,000 in savings. He's asking for almost $1 million based on that assumption. And when he finds out the truth? That's the point. I want him to find out. Publicly. Daniel grinned. The James Beard after party next week? Perfect venue. Chicago's entire food establishment will be there. You're cold-blooded, my friend. I'm done being ashamed of what I built. Third meeting was the most important. 2 p.m. at FBI offices on West Roosevelt with Agent Patricia Wells. Mr. Spencer, your son-in-law's call last night confirms our timeline, Agent Wells said, reviewing her notes. The indictment becomes public record Monday morning. He knows he'll need bail money. Oh. How much does he actually owe? Client accounts? $4.2 million missing over 6 years. Agent Wells showed me financial documents, but the bail amount depends on flight risk assessment. His family has assets overseas. $4.2 million. Christopher hadn't just been skimming, he'd been systematically looting his clients' retirement accounts. Agent Wells, what happens if I loan him the money? That depends. Are you recording your conversations? I pulled out my phone, showed her the recording app. Every word since last night. Smart man, she smiled. If you're willing to continue cooperating, we might be able to gather additional evidence, potentially reduce his ability to claim ignorance about the source of missing funds. What do you need me to do? Keep talking to him. Let him explain exactly how he plans to repay you. Get him to discuss his business operations, his client relationships, his methods for moving money. He'll incriminate himself? Mr. Spencer, in my experience, desperate people say things they wouldn't normally say, especially to someone they consider beneath them. Agent Wells was right about desperation, but she was wrong about one thing. Christopher didn't consider me beneath him. He'd forgotten I existed at all. That was going to be his biggest mistake. The James Beard Foundation after-party at the Drake Hotel should have been a celebration. Chicago's food industry elite gathering to honor culinary excellence, network, and enjoy some of the city's best cuisine. Instead, it became a battleground. I arrived at 7 p.m. wearing my best suit, a charcoal gray Tom Ford that had cost me more than Christopher spent on his weekly dry cleaning. The hotel ballroom buzzed with conversation from 400 guests, award-winning chefs, restaurant owners, food critics, and industry executives. Daniel Brennan found me at the bar. "You ready for this?" "Christopher doesn't even know I'm coming." "That's what makes it beautiful." Daniel ordered 2 whiskeys. "Half the room knows about your holdings company. The other half is about to find out." Spencer Holdings had become somewhat legendary in Chicago food circles, not because I publicized it, but because anonymity in the restaurant world is impossible. When you own distribution contracts that supply 60% of the city's fine dining establishments, people notice. At 7:45 p.m., I was talking with Maria Santos, food critic for the Chicago Tribune, when the conversation stopped. Christopher Hamilton had entered the ballroom. He looked exactly like what he was, a man facing federal indictment in 60 hours. His usually perfect appearance showed cracks. The Armani suit hung slightly loose, like he'd lost weight. His trademark confidence had been replaced by the hypervigilance of someone expecting bad news. He spotted me across the room, and his face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, calculation, then something that looked almost like relief. He approached with Madison beside him. My daughter looked tired, older than her 28 years. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she knew more about Christopher's situation than he'd admitted. "Maverick." Christopher's smile was forced. "I didn't expect to see you here." "James Beard Foundation invited me to judge the regional competition," I said evenly. "Same invitation I've received for the past 3 years." Madison looked surprised. "You've been judging for 3 years?" "Your father's become quite respected in culinary circles," Maria Santos interjected. "His expansion into food distribution has been remarkable." Christopher's expression tightened. "Food distribution?" "Spencer Holdings," Maria continued, "one of Chicago's most successful food service companies. I'm actually working on a feature about Maverick's business empire for next month's issue." Business empire. The words hit Christopher like a physical blow. "I wasn't aware you'd expanded beyond your restaurant," Christopher said carefully. "Several expansions, actually, though I try to keep things quiet." I smiled. "Privacy is important in business, don't you think?" Christopher's jaw clenched. He was starting to understand that the man he'd been condescending to for 15 years might not be exactly who he thought. "Madison tells me you might be able to help with our situation," Christopher said, lowering his voice. "What situation is that?" "The legal matter we discussed, the $850,000. The number hung in the air. Several nearby conversations stopped as people registered the amount. Maria Santos's journalistic instincts sharpened. "Legal matter?" "Nothing serious," Christopher said quickly. "Just some regulatory questions about client compliance." "Regulatory questions?" Maria's pen was already out. "What kind of regulatory questions?" Christopher realized his mistake. He'd brought up his legal problems at a party full of reporters and industry insiders. "It's a private matter," Madison said, stepping closer to her husband. "Of course," I said. "Though, Christopher, I should mention, I've been reconsidering your request." "Reconsidering how?" "Well, $850,000 is significant money. I'd need to understand more about your regulatory questions before making that kind of investment." Christopher's face flushed. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately?" "I thought you said it wasn't serious." I kept my voice conversational. "Surely there's no harm in discussing regulatory compliance in front of industry colleagues." Daniel Brennan joined our circle, bringing Chef Rebecca Thompson, winner of this year's Outstanding Chef Award. More people were drifting toward our conversation, drawn by the obvious tension. "Christopher Hamilton," Rebecca said, extending her hand. "I know your wife Madison, but I don't think we've met." "Christopher's a financial advisor," Madison said. "He manages investment portfolios for high net worth clients." "Interesting," Rebecca said. "Maverick here has become quite the investment success story himself. Spencer Holdings is revolutionizing food distribution in the Midwest." "Spencer Holdings?" Madison looked at me with confusion. "Dad, what's Spencer Holdings?" The question stopped all conversation within a 15-foot radius. My own daughter didn't know about the company I'd built. She had no idea what I'd accomplished during 15 years of enforced silence. "It's a food service company I started," I said simply. "When?" "February 2020. "But But why didn't you tell me? I looked at Madison, then at Christopher, then back at Madison. When exactly would I have told you? At Christmas dinner? Emma's birthday party? During our regular family conversations? The silence was deafening. Everyone within earshot now understood the family dynamic they were witnessing. Christopher stepped forward. Maverick, perhaps we should... Actually, Christopher, since you brought up the $850,000 in front of everyone, maybe we should discuss the terms publicly too. I turned to address the growing crowd. Christopher here needs me to loan him bail money by Monday morning. Apparently, those regulatory questions are more serious than he initially indicated. Christopher's face went white. You can't be serious. About loaning you the money? I'm considering it. About discussing it publicly? You started this conversation in a room full of reporters. Maria Santos was taking notes furiously. Other guests were pulling out phones. Christopher grabbed my arm. We need to talk. Privately. Now. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. Let go of me, Christopher. He released my arm, but didn't step back. You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I straightened my tie. I'm having a conversation at a party with my son-in-law about his legal troubles. Nothing more, nothing less. Christopher turned to Madison. We're leaving. Now. But Madison was staring at me with an expression I hadn't seen in 15 years. It looked like she was seeing me for the first time. Dad, she said quietly, how much is Spencer Holdings worth? That's when Christopher realized he'd walked into something much bigger than a simple request for bail money. He'd walked into his worst nightmare, the moment when everyone discovered exactly who had the real power in this relationship. The question hung in the air like smoke. How much is Spencer Holdings worth? Before I could answer, a new voice cut through the tension. Excuse me, Mr. Spencer? Everyone turned. A woman in a navy blue suit approached our circle, showing an FBI badge. Agent Patricia Wells, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Could I speak with you for a moment? The effect was instantaneous. Christopher went rigid. Madison's eyes widened. The crowd of food industry executives suddenly found themselves witnessing what was clearly the intersection of fine dining and federal law enforcement. Of course, Agent Wells, I said calmly, though I should mention Mr. Hamilton here was just discussing some regulatory questions he's facing. Perhaps you could help clarify the situation? Agent Wells looked at Christopher with professional interest. Mr. Hamilton, I wasn't expecting to see you here. Madison wanted to attend the awards ceremony, Christopher stammered. How thoughtful. Agent Wells turned back to me. Mr. Spencer, I wanted to inform you that the indictment in the matter we discussed will be unsealed Monday morning, 9 a.m. Central Time. I thought you should know before it becomes public record. Indictment. The word rippled through the crowd like electricity. Maria Santos stepped forward. Agent Wells, I'm Maria Santos from the Chicago Tribune. Could you comment on the nature of this indictment? Securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering, multiple counts. Mr. Hamilton's financial advisory practice has been under federal investigation for 18 months. Christopher looked like he might collapse. You can't... I have rights. Absolutely you have rights, Agent Wells agreed, including the right to remain silent, which you might want to consider exercising right about now. Madison grabbed Christopher's arm. What is she talking about? What indictment? Agent Wells answered before Christopher could respond. Your husband has been systematically stealing from his clients' investment accounts and laundering the money through fake restaurant ventures. Total amount missing from client accounts, $4.2 million. The crowd erupted in whispered conversations. Food industry executives, many of whom managed their own substantial finances, understood immediately what they were hearing. Daniel Brennan stepped forward. Agent Wells, when you say fake restaurant ventures, are you referring to businesses that were supposed to receive legitimate investment funding? Exactly. Mr. Hamilton would recommend restaurant investments to his clients, collect their money, but instead of funding actual restaurant operations, he'd move the money through shell companies and extract it as consulting fees. Rebecca Thompson looked sick. He was using our industry to steal from people? Unfortunately, yes. The restaurant business provided perfect cover because of its reputation for high cash flow and complicated financing structures. I watched Christopher's face as his crimes were laid out in front of Chicago's culinary elite. This was the industry he'd dismissed as beneath his family's social standing. Now he was learning that these simple restaurant people understood financial fraud better than he'd anticipated. Madison looked at me with dawning comprehension. "Dad, is this why you've been meeting with corporate attorneys?" "Mr. Spencer has been cooperating with our investigation for 6 months," Agent Wells has confirmed. "His businesses were unknowingly used as references for several fraudulent schemes. When he discovered the connection, he contacted federal authorities immediately." Jake Morrison from the Chicago Tribune pushed forward. "Agent Wells, could you clarify Mr. Spencer's role in the investigation?" "Mr. Spencer is a cooperating witness. His information has been instrumental in building our case." Agent Wells glanced at me. "In fact, Mr. Spencer's business records helped us trace how Mr. Hamilton moved stolen money through the restaurant industry." Christopher found his voice. You've been working with the FBI against me?" "I've been working with the FBI to protect the restaurant industry from fraud," I corrected. "The fact that you're implicated is incidental." "Incidental?" Christopher's voice rose. "You set me up. You led me to believe you'd help with bail money when you've been building a case against me for months." Agent Wells intervened. "Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Spencer didn't set you up. You called him asking for money. He reported that contact to federal authorities, as required by his cooperation agreement." The crowd was transfixed. They'd come to celebrate culinary achievement, and instead were watching a real-time federal investigation unfold. Maria Santos addressed me directly. "Mr. Spencer, earlier you mentioned reconsidering Mr. Hamilton's request for $850,000. Was that part of the federal investigation?" "No, Maria. That was personal." I looked at Christopher. You see, Christopher has spent 15 years explaining to my daughter why I wasn't worthy of their family, how my profession was embarrassing, how my social status was inadequate. I paused, letting the room absorb that information. But Christopher made one crucial error in his assessment. He assumed that because I work in restaurants, I must not understand business. He confused my profession with my intelligence. Daniel Brennan smiled. "Tell them about Spencer Holdings, Mav." I looked around the room at faces I'd known for years. Chefs, owners, food critics, industry executives. These were my people. They understood what I'd built. Spencer Holdings is a food distribution and investment company. We own warehouse facilities, transportation networks, and supply contracts throughout the Midwest. Our client list includes 68% of Chicago's fine dining establishments. Rebecca Thompson nodded. "Spencer Holdings supplies our restaurants, has for 3 years. Exceptional quality, competitive pricing." "Last month," I continued, "Spencer Holdings completed the sale of our restaurant chain, 15 locations, to Midwest Food Group for $11.3 million. $11.3 million. The number hit Christopher like a physical blow. His face cycled through disbelief, shock, and what looked like nausea. Madison stared at me. $11 million? Dad, you're a millionaire?" "Several times over," Agent Wells added helpfully. "Mr. Spencer's cooperation with our investigation included providing detailed financial records. His businesses are quite impressive." Christopher finally understood what had happened. The man he'd been calling just a cook for 15 years was worth more than Christopher had ever dreamed of earning. The man he'd excluded from family photos had built an empire while Christopher was committing federal crimes. Jake Morrison was scribbling furiously. "Mr. Spencer, this is an incredible story. Local chef builds multi-million-dollar food empire while facing family rejection. It's like something out of a movie." "It's like justice," Rebecca Thompson said quietly. "Poetic justice." Christopher looked around the room, seeing his social destruction playing out in real time. Chicago's food industry elite, people whose opinions shaped the city's cultural landscape, were witnessing his humiliation and my vindication simultaneously. "Madison," Christopher said desperately, "we need to leave, now." But Madison wasn't moving. She was staring at me with an expression of wonder and shame, and something that might have been pride. "Dad," she said softly, "I had no idea. All these years we thought—" "You thought I was exactly what Christopher told you I was," I said gently. "Someone to be ashamed of." Agent Wells checked her watch. Mr. Spencer, well, we should wrap up our business here. Monday's going to be a busy day. And she turned to Christopher. Mr. Hamilton, I'd strongly recommend you contact your attorney this weekend. The indictment includes 18 federal charges. Bail will be set Monday afternoon. Christopher's world had collapsed in the span of 20 minutes. His crimes were public, his social standing destroyed, and the man he'd spent 15 years humiliating had been revealed as not just successful but instrumental in bringing him to justice. As Agent Wells walked away, I looked at Christopher one last time. About that $850,000 you need, I said quietly. I've decided against it, but I'm sure your wealthy friends at the country club will be happy to help. Christopher and I both knew that was a lie. His wealthy friends would disappear the moment news of his indictment broke. The man who'd convinced my daughter I wasn't good enough for their family was about to learn what real isolation felt like. Christopher and Madison left the party in silence, but I stayed until nearly midnight. Word of the evening's events spread through the ballroom like wildfire, and suddenly everyone wanted to discuss Spencer Holdings, my cooperation with the FBI, and what would happen next. But the real conversation happened 2 days later, on Sunday afternoon, when Madison called. Dad, can we meet? Just the two of us? We agreed to meet at Spencer's Kitchen, my original restaurant on Lincoln Avenue, the place where everything started. She arrived at 2 p.m., looking like she hadn't slept in days. $11 million, she said, sitting across from me in the same booth where I used to plan my expansion. Dad, I don't understand. When did you... I started Spencer Holdings in February 2020. Buoni bought the first distribution warehouse that spring. I poured coffee from the pot I'd brought to the table. By 2021, we were supplying 47 restaurants. Last month, I sold the restaurant chain portion to focus on distribution and investment. But why didn't you tell me? All these years I thought you were struggling. Christopher said you were barely making ends meet. When would I have told you, Madison? We haven't had a real conversation in 15 years. She started crying then, quietly but steadily. I know, and I'm so sorry. But Dad, we didn't know. You thought I was exactly what Christopher said I was. A simple chef with no ambition, no intelligence, no value beyond what I could provide for your wedding. We didn't... She stopped herself. Yes, that's exactly what we thought. The honesty was brutal, but necessary. Madison, I need you to understand something. I didn't build Spencer Holdings to prove you wrong. I built it because Christopher's rejection forced me to realize I'd been playing small. I'd been so focused on being the father you wanted that I'd stopped being the man I could become. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. Christopher's been lying to me about everything, hasn't he? What do you know about his legal situation? More than he thinks. I hired my own attorney Friday morning. Madison's voice was steady now. Dad, he's stolen over $4 million. $4 million. And he's been using our marriage, our family, as cover for federal crimes. What does your attorney say? That I need to cooperate with the FBI to avoid being charged as an accessory. That I need to file for divorce immediately to protect Emma's future. She looked up at me. Dad, I'm going to lose everything. The house, the cars, probably my job, once this becomes public. What about Emma? Christopher's family has completely cut us off. Won't return my calls, won't help with bail, nothing. They're protecting their own assets. Madison laughed bitterly. Turns out when you marry up, you can fall down just as fast. I reached across the table and took her hand. Emma is my granddaughter. Whatever happens with Christopher, whatever happens between us, Emma will be protected. I promise you that. Dad, I don't deserve your help. Not after everything we put you through. You're right. You don't deserve it. The words were harsh but necessary. But Emma does. And somewhere under 15 years of Christopher's influence, my daughter still exists. Madison squeezed my hand. What do you want from me? How do we fix this? First, you cooperate fully with the FBI. No protecting Christopher, no minimizing what he's done. Complete honesty. Done? Second, you rebuild your relationship with Emma without Christopher's influence. She needs to know her grandfather, not the version Christopher created. Yes? Third, you understand that forgiveness is earned, not given. This conversation is a starting point, not an ending point. You spent 15 years choosing Christopher's judgment over your father's love. That damage doesn't heal overnight. Madison nodded, tears starting again. I understand. My phone rang. Christopher's number. Answer it, Madison said. I want to hear what he says. I put the call on speaker. Maverick, thank God you answered. Listen, I've been thinking about our conversation. About the money. Christopher's voice was desperate, higher pitched than usual. What about it? I'm willing to offer 30% interest. That's $255,000 profit for you on a 6-month loan. Christopher, I already gave you my answer. But that was before... Look, I know Friday night was awkward, but family is family, right? We can work past personal differences when it really matters. Madison stared at the phone in disbelief. Christopher, I said evenly, let me make sure I understand. You want me to loan you $850,000 to pay bail for federal charges that include using my industry to commit fraud? It's not that simple. And you want this loan despite spending 15 years convincing my daughter that I was unworthy of your family? Maverick, please. And you're offering this deal while facing 18 federal felony charges and $4.2 million in client theft? Silence on the line. Christopher, here's my counteroffer. I'll loan you the money under the following conditions. I looked at Madison as I spoke. First, you publicly admit to Madison and Emma that you were wrong about me, that you manipulated Madison into cutting off her father based on class prejudice and personal insecurity. I can't. Second, you sign a confession detailing every lie you told Madison about my character, my profession, and my financial status. Well, that's impossible. Third, you agree to federal supervision of any loan repayment, including full disclosure of the source of repayment funds. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. You're trying to destroy me, Christopher said finally. No, Christopher. I'm offering you exactly what you offered me for 15 years. Conditional acceptance based on public humiliation and the surrender of personal dignity. I won't do it. Then I wish you luck finding other financing options. I paused. Though I understand your wealthy friends at the country club have been remarkably unavailable since Friday's news broke. Maverick, please, I'm begging you. Begging me? I looked at Madison, who was staring at the phone. The same man who banned me from my granddaughter's birthday parties is begging me for help? Yes, I'm begging you. Then you understand how I felt for 15 years, begging for crumbs of inclusion in my own family. I hung up the phone. Madison sat quietly for a long moment. You're not going to help him, are you? No. Good. She took a shaky breath. Dad, what happens to me and Emma? You start over, without Christopher's money, without his social connections, without his family name. I smiled, just like I did. I'm scared. Good. Fear means you understand what you're facing. I stood up. Madison, your mother used to say that character isn't built in comfortable times. It's built when everything falls apart and you have to decide who you really are. Who am I without Christopher? That's what we're about to find out. Monday morning, March 20th, 2023, changed everything. The federal indictment against Christopher Hamilton became public record at 9 a.m. sharp. By 9:15, Jake Morrison's article was live on the Chicago Tribune website. Local financial advisor, charged in 4.2M fraud scheme, prominent chef aides federal investigation. By 10 a.m., Christopher was in federal custody. I know this because Agent Wells called me with updates. The arrest happened at Christopher's office in the Willis Tower. 17 FBI agents, 3 computer forensics specialists, and enough evidence boxes to fill 2 trucks. Mr. Spencer thought you'd want to know. Mr. Hamilton's bail was set at exactly $850,000, Agent Wells told me. The federal judge noted his family connections and overseas asset access as flight risk factors. $850,000, the exact amount he'd asked me for. Was bail posted? Not yet. His attorney requested a 24-hour extension to arrange financing. Agent Wells paused. Apparently, his usual sources are unresponsive. The Hamilton family's social circle had vanished overnight. 40 years of country club memberships, charity board appointments, and elite social connections meant nothing when federal charges entered the picture. By Tuesday, the story had gone national. CNN picked up the Tribune piece, focusing on the chef who helped FBI catch white-collar criminal. Fox Business ran a segment about Spencer Holdings as an example of hidden business success in America's heartland. My phone didn't stop ringing. Food Network wanted to discuss a documentary about Spencer Holdings. 3 different publishers called about book deals. Investment firms from New York and Los Angeles reached out about expansion opportunities. But the most important call came Thursday afternoon. Grandpa Maverick? I almost dropped the phone. Emma's voice, after 15 years of silence. Emma, sweetheart, is that you? Mom said I could call you. She said some things about you weren't true. Emma's voice was tentative, like she was testing whether I was real. What did she tell you? That you're not poor, that you built a big company, that you tried to see me, but Daddy wouldn't let you. Daddy. She still called Christopher Daddy because he was the only father figure she'd known. Emma, there's a lot to explain. Would you like to meet for ice cream sometime? Just you and me? Could we? Mom said maybe we could, if you wanted to. I've wanted to for 15 years, sweetheart. That Saturday, I met Emma at Jenny's Ice Cream on North Avenue. She was tall for 12, with Madison's dark hair and my grandmother's green eyes. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure what to expect from her grandfather. Are you really a millionaire? Was the first thing she asked. Yes, but you work in a restaurant. I own restaurants and other businesses. Sometimes the most successful people are the ones who look ordinary. Emma considered this while eating her strawberry buttermilk ice cream. Daddy said you were poor because you didn't go to college. Did he tell you I dropped out of college to take care of your grandmother when she got sick? No. Emma's eyes widened. He didn't tell me that. There's a lot Daddy didn't tell you, sweetheart. Not because he's a bad person, but because sometimes adults make mistakes about what's important. We spent 2 hours together. I told her about the handmade crib still waiting in my garage, about the birthday presents I'd bought every year but never been allowed to give, about the college fund I'd started for her before she was even born. How much money is in my college fund? $300,000. Enough for any school you want to attend. Emma was quiet for a long time. Why didn't Daddy let you see me? How do you explain class prejudice to a 12-year-old? How do you tell a child that her father figure was embarrassed by her grandfather's success? Daddy was confused about what makes a person valuable, I said carefully. He thought money and social status were more important than family and character. Is that why he's in jail? Madison had told her the truth about Christopher's arrest. No point lying when it would be in the news for months. Partly, yes, he made bad choices about money that hurt other people. Are you still mad at Mom? The hardest question of all. I'm disappointed in choices your mom made, but I love her and I love you, and love means we keep trying even when people make mistakes. Emma finished her ice cream and looked at me seriously. Mom cries a lot now. She's scared. Her whole life just changed. Will you help us? I'm already helping you, Emma. You just didn't know it. The following week brought more consequences for Christopher. His financial advisory license was revoked. His assets were frozen, pending restitution hearings. Hamilton and Associates declared bankruptcy, putting 12 employees out of work. Madison filed for divorce and moved with Emma to a 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. Her job at the marketing firm survived, but barely. Several clients canceled contracts when the Hamilton name became toxic. Christopher's bail was eventually posted by his aunt in Milwaukee, but only after he agreed to surrender his passport and submit to electronic monitoring. The federal trial was scheduled for September. Meanwhile, Spencer Holdings continued expanding. The publicity from the federal case, ironically, generated new business. Restaurant owners appreciated knowing their supplier had helped law enforcement clean up industry fraud. By June, we'd signed contracts with 32 new establishments, and expanded into Wisconsin and Indiana. But the most satisfying consequence was social. The country club that had welcomed Christopher's membership for 12 years quietly asked him to resign. The charity boards that had featured the Hamilton name prominently removed them from donor lists. The social calendar that had once revolved around Christopher and Madison's presence simply continued without them. Chicago's elite society moved on as if Christopher Hamilton had never existed. Justice, it turned out, looked exactly like irrelevance. 6 months later, in September 2023, Christopher Hamilton pled guilty to 14 federal charges. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $4.2 million in restitution to his victims. I attended the sentencing hearing, not out of vindictiveness, but to watch the final chapter of a story that had shaped 15 years of my life. Christopher looked smaller in his orange federal jumpsuit. Prison had stripped away the expensive suits, the confident posture, the aura of inherited privilege. He looked like what he'd always been underneath, an ordinary man who'd confused his advantages with his abilities. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Christopher stood and looked directly at me in the gallery. "Your Honor, I'd like to apologize to my family, to my clients, and to the restaurant industry I used to commit these crimes." His voice was steady but defeated. I spent years believing that my education and social status made me superior to others. I was wrong. Character isn't inherited, it's earned through actions. It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get from Christopher Hamilton. Madison and Emma were building a new life. Madison's apartment was modest but comfortable, and Emma was thriving at her new school. Without Christopher's influence, Madison began rediscovering parts of herself that had been buried for 15 years. She started visiting me every Sunday at Spencer's kitchen, not asking for help, just talking, learning who her father really was beneath the man Christopher had convinced her to be ashamed of. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Madison said one Sunday in October, watching me prep vegetables for the evening service. "Always. Why didn't you fight back sooner? Why did you let Christopher treat you that way for so long?" I considered the question while dicing onions. "Because fighting back would have cost me the chance to be your father. As long as there was hope you might come back, I wasn't going to do anything that would make that impossible." "But you could have told me about Spencer Holdings. You could have proved him wrong." "Madison, if I'd used my success to pressure you into choosing me over Christopher, what would that have taught Emma about love? That it's conditional on wealth and power?" She nodded slowly. "You wanted us to choose you because we loved you, not because you could prove you were successful. Love based on status isn't love. It's a business transaction." Emma had embraced her grandfather with the enthusiasm only children can manage. She spent Saturday afternoons with me, learning to cook and hearing stories about her grandmother. The handmade crib finally moved from my garage to her bedroom in Madison's apartment. "Grandpa, are you going to teach me about business too?" Emma asked one Saturday while we made pasta from scratch. "Do you want to learn?" "Yeah, I want to understand how you built Spencer Holdings. Mom says you did it by working hard and being smart. I did it by paying attention to what people needed and figuring out how to provide it better than anyone else. I showed her how to roll the pasta thin. Business isn't about being the loudest or the fanciest. It's about being the most reliable." "Is that why you didn't loan Daddy money for bail?" Emma still called Christopher Daddy, and I didn't try to change that. He'd been a father figure for most of her life, even if he'd proven unworthy of the role. I didn't loan him money because he'd never learned that actions have consequences. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the results of their choices. Even if it hurts? Especially if it hurts. That's how people learn. The new boundaries were clear and consistently enforced. Madison was welcome in my life, but only as an adult, making adult choices about accountability and respect. Christopher was not welcome under any circumstances. Emma would always have my love and support, but she would also learn that relationships require mutual respect and honesty. Spencer Holdings continued growing, but success no longer felt like validation. It felt like purpose. The man who'd been dismissed as just a chef for 15 years had built something that mattered, employed people who depended on him, and created value in his community. More importantly, I'd learned that dignity can't be taken away by other people. It can only be surrendered. Christopher Hamilton had spent 15 years trying to convince my family that I was beneath them. In the end, he'd only convinced me that I was exactly where I belonged. If you've ever been told you're not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough, remember this story. The people who matter will see your value. The people who don't see your value don't matter. And sometimes, the best revenge is just living well. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe if you enjoyed hearing how this all played out.